All right, guys. Hey, one of the greatest shows of all time, in my opinion, is Seinfeld. I still watch it to this day. I didn't watch it whenever it was live, 1991 to 1998, but I am so obsessed with it to this day. And I think a lot of people out there are the same way. Now, it's not just about entertainment to me. I always try to learn something from the greats. And I really believe you can take something from a show like Seinfeld and apply it to your own life. So I'm going to give you a couple things that I learned from Seinfeld, and I think you could apply it to maybe your business or what you're putting out there. But some cool facts that I want to start off with. Let me just tell you how successful it was, and maybe you might see some things that you didn't see otherwise. The last episode of Seinfeld got 76 million viewers. That is 58% of all people watching TV that night were watching Seinfeld. So 60% of all people watching TV on that day were watching Seinfeld. How unbelievable is that? Think about the success that has to put that in perspective. Breaking Bad is one of the most notorious, famous endings of any show ever. And I believe it only reached 10.5 million viewers. 10.5 compared to 76 million. Truly successful. A couple things that stand out to me. The original character of Kramer was written as Kessler. Now, what's funny about this is in the first episode, you hear him say, "Hey, this is my neighbor Kessler." And then years later, they do an episode where it goes back in time. I think it's called like The Betrayal. And at the very beginning of, or at the very end of the episode, which is technically the beginning and the way that it's put out, is that he introduces himself and he says, "Hey, I'm your neighbor." He goes, "Oh, you're Kessler." He goes, No, I'm Kramer." "Oh, I thought it said Kessler on the door." And it's basically them kind of nodding to the audience saying, "Hey, we changed the name on you from episode 1 to episode 2. I don't know if you noticed it." It's pretty cool. Jason Alexander, here's a cool little fact for you. Jason Alexander read it and said it was almost too good to be true. He thought it had no chance of succeeding. He read the script, thought it was too good for TV. He's like, well, this was written for people like me. So Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David got together and started writing. And it was really written by Larry David, but Jerry Seinfeld sort of like the genius when it comes to like putting it out there for people to judge, people to see. Anyway, when Jason Alexander was reading the script, he thought, this is perfect for me. But the downside is people like me, we don't even watch TV, so it's never going to make it. He thought it was too high end. Now, there's a couple of things I'm going to tell you what I applied to from reading all these stats and the behind the scenes. But what they did was create a TV show that they would watch. And it was actually created as a one-off. For Saturday Night Live that wasn't going to air one week, they needed a show, and he just put something together. And it was supposed to be a one-off, and it turned into something big. So, but they wrote it for one reason, which was, for people like them. The downside is these people did not watch TV, so they didn't think it was going to make it. Years later, there's a guy named Michael Costanza. Michael Costanza was a good friend of Jerry's growing up, like a real deal friend. He was just like Jerry, just like George Costanza, did certain things, can't stand ya, these nicknames. This is where Jerry got all this from. Michael Costanza came forward and sued him and the company for $100 million. Took him to court, didn't win. But just think about how much money they had to spend to defend that ridiculousness. Number 5 here that I think is probably the greatest takeaway that I'm going to kind of twist this into like a learning lesson is the no hugging or no learning from from the Seinfeld era. Larry David did not want any hugging or any learning. He did not want any meaning to anybody's life throughout the whole 9 years or 8 years that would give them some type of like change in philosophy. He didn't want any deep meanings. He didn't want to teach the audience anything. He wanted to make them laugh, and he wanted to entertain them, plain and simple. Too many shows out there want to keep teaching keep giving lessons, so they're more of a teacher rather than an entertainer. Larry David made this a strict policy. Any episode that they would write, there'd be two things. There would be no hugging and no learning. Think about how crazy that is. Number 6, Jerry's favorite episode by far, he says, is The Marine Biologist. It's my favorite episode. Well, it's his favorite moment when George pulls out the golf ball. He says that is his favorite moment of the entire 9 years. All right. He was offered, I believe, $110 million to do a season 10, turned it down because he wanted to end it on a high note. A lot of things you can take from these successful people, but The Marine Biologist is the one that really made me fall in love with the show. So I'd love to hear what your favorite episode is. Put it down below. So what I want to talk about is two things. Number one is character development. And number two, this no hugging and no learning philosophy. Character development. If you look back to the first season, you see a Kramer, you see a Jerry, you see a George. They're almost like a minute piece of who they really become in season 8 and 9. If you think back, it's not nearly as funny. And there's a couple reasons for that. It's because the characters are not developed enough. You don't know their backstories. You don't know the idiosyncrasies. You don't know what they've been funny for a long time. You're getting into their life for the very first time. So the writers had to write in almost like an introduction where they can't be too weird, too crazy, too fast. Over time, they ramp it up. You start to see the Dr. Van Nostrans. You start to see these idiosyncrasies that George has that are just insane. How Jerry looks at things. You get Elaine involved, and she adds so much to it. But what you realize is that the character development is essential. Going back to your life, your business, whatever you're putting out there, who you are now is probably going to be a small piece of who you are 5 years from now if you do it the right way. So when I started off, I was very shy and timid and all that on video or in meetings or on stage. I didn't want to stand out too much because I wanted them to get to know me at the ground level where I couldn't really make enemies just yet, if that makes sense. But over time, you get a little bit more loose because now you have people who know who you are and know what you're capable of. You're able to prove yourself to so many people. My character as a businessman or an entrepreneur has evolved into something a little bit more concrete and a little bit more, I guess you could say, developed. So I think anybody out there, if you're not developing, if you're not changing your way of doing things, it's going to look bad 5 years from now. I think you need to evolve. You need to let people know what you believe more, know what's funny to you, know your personality more, because over time you're going to start to build your base and your following, and people are going to actually get involved with the character. So going back to Seinfeld, they started getting insane with the character, which made them, more beloved characters than ever. So if you're not evolving, you're dying. And people right now who are the exact same person 5 years ago, nobody's going to care. They've already seen that show. You need to keep developing, keep entertaining, keep growing as a person, as a businessman or businesswoman. The other part of it is the no hugging and no learning philosophy. This is something that I've applied to my business recently. So many people out there, and I'm doing this right now as I'm trying to teach a lesson. Now, this is just one channel of actually 3 different channels that I'm a part of now, one of which is a lingerie company I'm an investor in. The other part is a magazine where we can get wild. And it's not just about teaching lessons. It's about entertaining. So Larry David had this philosophy that everything he put out had to do nothing with teaching a lesson. So many people out there get a podcast together. They get on video, and their whole goal is to teach a lesson constantly. I don't think in the long run that's going to get the greatest, bang for your buck. You get Tony Robbins out there who did it on a grand stage. He's teaching lessons. There's that type of person. To get to that is really hard. I think the people who are the greatest entertainers, the people who can just keep people involved in watching them, it's not just about teaching a lesson. It's about entertaining. And so with Rockstar's Dream Magazine, which is this philosophy, we're not just trying to teach a lesson. And we're starting to see great returns on our investment. If people sit down and they read something or watch a video and they're not just going to be a student and learn something, but they're just going to pass the time and be entertained, it's a better chance of it growing and getting into more hands. Just people don't want to be taught nonstop. Now, this is on Facebook, YouTube, and all that. I think it's important to connect the dots here. But if you go into every interview, everything, or whatever you put out there on social media, it could be a post, it could be a tweet, it could be a Instagram a story. If you're just trying to teach and not entertain, you're going to lose a lot of people. And I've seen a great return on my investment by putting it out there. You're starting to see people care more. They're engaging more. They're laughing more on your stories, on your Facebook stories too. It just works. The no hugging, no learning philosophy. If you start to add that into what you're doing, I think you're going to see some great returns. So don't just teach. You still teach, but you also got to add the entertainment in there. And that's how the greatest show of all time was able to do it. So you got to follow what works for people. I sit down and watch Seinfeld now to kind of put my mind at ease, get my mind off of things. So if you have a business out there, are you trying to just teach people? You might lose the interest of them if you just keep doing and saying the same bullshit over and over and over. So that's why on my feeds, you start to see a little bit of mix of little political humor, a little bit of sex appeal, a little bit of Rockstar Dream magazine, which we have many articles we're putting out to just entertain, not teach a damn thing. So that's it. That's my run on Seinfeld. I don't want to keep this too long for you, but if you have a favorite episode, if there's something that stands out, comment down below, reach out to me. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, because Seinfeld, I could talk about it for days. Let me know what's your favorite episode or favorite moment, and I'll hit you back. So thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of the day. Keep living the dream.